And we are back for prepping for winter with the first Arianne sample chapter. And yes, I pronounce her name Arianne. We last saw Arianne in the Watcher chapter back in A Dance with Dragons, where she was attending the welcoming party for Balon's swan and Doran's dispersal of the sand snakes. Arianne had seemed to become Doran's crony fully, defending Doran's inaction to the sand snakes, as well as Doran's story that Darkstar attacked Marcella and Ares Oakhart died defending her. The Sand Snakes, by the way, didn't believe the story for a second. Arianne had believed that she should have gone to King's Landing instead of Lady Nym, but Doran said that he would have a new task for her soon. Doran's spies and lice tell him that a fleet with elephants is coming to Westeros. And now let's continue. Arianne. So Arianne seems to have claimed her name, which would point to her feeling more self-actualized and in control of her life. Her 2 chapters in A Feast for Crows were called The Queenmaker and The Princess in the Tower. The names Queenmaker and Princess in the Tower are feminized references to events in the War of the Roses. Essentially, there was this guy named Richard Neville, the Earl of Warwick, who was called the Kingmaker because he sided first with King Henry VI in a rebellion against Richard of York, but then switches sides to Richard's side and is successful in putting his son Edward IV on the throne. He then has a falling out with Edward IV and tries to install Edward's brother and fails, and then helps reinstall Henry VI. The Kingmaker ends up dying in a battle where Edward IV ends up reclaiming the throne from Henry VI again. Edward IV's son, Edward V, and his brother were the princes in the Tower. Their uncle, Richard III, essentially usurped their throne and locked them away, and they were never heard from again. It's hard to say why our author is evoking these historical events. I suppose it's to show the self-serving nature of kingmakers and usurpers, and to highlight the sheer idiocy of the Game of Thrones. King-making is essentially war-making, and Richard Neville and Sir Criston Cole made kings to the woe of the kingdom, and Arianne was on the same path. But all of this highlights something inherently wrong with our setup of Doran sending Arianne to treat with Aegon. The Game of Thrones is sheer idiocy, and Doran knows this. The glory of him staying out of the War of the Five Kings was his final line in the Watcher chapter, so why would Doran join the war now? On the morning that she left the Water Gardens, her father rose from his chair to kiss her on both cheeks. "The fate of Dorne goes with you, daughter," he said as he pressed the parchment into her hands. "Go swiftly, go safely, be my eyes and ears and voice, but most of all, take care." So we have a bit of melodrama to start our chapter. Doran Martell rises from his chair to add emphasis and emotion to the scene. Now those words, the fate of Dorne, we've heard before. In the Merchant's Man chapter, Quentyn also believed that Doran had put the fate of Dorne in his hands, and he too was sent off from the Water Gardens. This doesn't seem to be the first time that Doran has performed this routine, and Doran tells Arianne to go swiftly and safely, which is recalled when Quentyn dismisses the Demon Road as too dangerous and slow, again remembering the words of his father. Now these are the similarities, but there are also differences. Arianne is asked to be Doran's eyes, ears, and voice, which is something Quentyn was never asked to do as far as we know. And Quentyn certainly did not take care in his actions, instead taking many risks. "I will, father." She did not shed a tear. Arianne Martell was a princess of Dorne, and Dornishmen did not waste water lightly. It was a near thing, though. It was not her father's kisses nor his hoarse voice that made her eyes glisten, but the effort that brought him to his feet, his legs trembling under him, his joints swollen and inflamed with gout. Standing was an act of love. Standing was an act of faith. He believes in me. I will not fail him. And so here we have a callback to those 2 previous Arianne chapters. The Queenmaker begins with an explanation of the value of water in Dorne at the dried-up wells of Shandystone, and the Princess in the Tower chapter begins with Arianne considering falling before her father's wheelchair, weeping. And so here we have an inversion. Instead of weeping, we have the holding back of tears, and instead of Arianne falling to Doran, we have Doran rising to her. Now again, I'd like to focus on the melodrama here. We all know about how hard it is for Doran to supposedly stand. Is an obvious symbol of love and strength. Perhaps too obvious. Willpower magically making one overcome disability. A classic yet ridiculous trope. Now one would think that the melodrama would be obvious enough, but our author then spends time to have Arianne overtly interpret the events for us, just in case somehow we missed it. Standing is an act of love, standing is an act of faith, he believes in me, which means in all probability he doesn't. Arianne has been mostly a failure. Why should Doran believe in her? And let's also remember that this scene mirrors her idea in Princess in the Tower. She will fall before Doran and weep to garner sympathy. She had planned melodrama for the sake of manipulation. Doran just outplayed Arianne using her own strategy. Now importantly, Arianne thinks that she will not fail him. This is something that Quentyn actually thinks both at the beginning of his journey in the Merchant's Man chapter and at the end of his journey in the Dragon Tamer chapter. 7 of them set out together on 7 Dornish sand steeds. A small party travels more swiftly than a large one, but the heir to Dorne does not ride alone. Now 7 Travelers recalls the Queenmaker chapter with its 7 travelers, which Arianne felt was lucky, although it turned out not to be so. We don't know if this new party's number of 7 is superstition or coincidence, but it should be noted that Quentyn's party only numbered 6. Now interestingly, Arianne mentions that speed is being compromised somewhat for honor and image. Doran claimed that speed was important, yet here he is slowing down his own mission by adding members. And the crew is taking many extra days by going over land over Dorne, and then again over land over much of the Stormlands. Now Doran of course did the same thing with Quentyn. He told him to be quick, but provided him no passage, which ended up delaying him severely. Now yes, one can make an argument about issues relating to safety and secrecy in choosing rapid private sea travel for Quentyn and Arianne. Sure, but all of this shows that Doran Martell is not really a man who prioritizes speed. From God's grace came Sir Daemon Sand, the bastard, once Prince Oberyn's squire, now Arianne's sworn shield. From Sunspear, 2 bold young knights, Joss Hood and Garibald Shells, to lend their swords to his. From the Water Gardens, 7 ravens and a tall young lad to tend them. His name was Nate, but he had been working with the birds so long that no one called him anything but Feathers. And since a princess must have some women to attend her, her company also included pretty Jane Ladybright and wild Elia Sand, a maid of 10 and 4. Now with Arianne's new companions, we can't help but compare them to her old queen-making companions and also Quentyn's companions. For queen-making, Arianne chose 3 people who she thought were her closest friends: Garren of the Greenblood, Sir Andre Dalt, and Spotted Silva Santagar. And she also chose her lover, Sir Aerys Oakheart, and there was Darkstar, who was there for alliance making. Still, she had 3 knights for her protection, Garren, her spy master, and representation from a number of different houses: Dalt, Dane, and Santagar. So Arianne made her choices for companions based on loyalty, protection, communication, and alliances. Doran's choices for Quentyn's companions were quite different. We had 4 knights: Sir Cletus Ironwood, Sir Archibald Ironwood, Sir Garrus Drinkwater, and Sir Willem Wells, but all of them were loyal to House Ironwood and not House Martell. There was also a maester, Kedri, of unknown loyalty, but who certainly wasn't the maester from Sunspear or the Water Gardens. He also didn't seem to have any ravens with him, so he couldn't update anyone. The houses represented were really only Ironwood, an Ironwood vassal, and a minor house called Wells. So while protection was certainly a factor with 4 knights, Doran had little interest in loyalty to him, communication, or alliances with major houses other than Ironwood. So now let's look at who Doran has chosen for this trip. We have Sir Daemon Sand, who is Oberyn's former squire, and 2 knights sworn to Sunspear from minor houses. Rather than a maester who Doran doesn't appear to trust, he has Feathers, his personal raven tender from the Water Gardens. This is an interesting bloke, considering Maester Keliote is the Water Gardens maester. There is also Jane Ladybright, who I am guessing is the daughter of Sunspear's treasurer, and Elia Sand, Oberyn's 5th daughter. So unlike Quentyn's companions, this group seems to be brimming with loyalty to Doran and Sunspear. And Feathers and the Ravens are a sign that Doran is very interested in secure communication. So like Arianne's choices with her queen-making companions, we see the priority of loyalty, protection, and communication. However, there is one way that this crew seems inadequate. The major houses of Dorne are not well represented. We have minor houses like Hood, Shells, and Ladybright, but the only representation from major houses like Illyrian and Uller are from bastards. Keep in mind, Arianne is going to meet a king, and she is bringing with her bastards and members of minor houses. Compare this with the exhaustive list of lords and ladies that Oberyn brought with him to King's Landing for Joffrey's wedding. Not to mention, Arianna's sworn shield is her ex-lover who took her virginity. Daemon Sand wanted to marry Arianna. Of all the people that Doran could have sent, he chose him. So while the group is certainly superior to Quentyn's in terms of loyalty and communication, it's certainly not the best group to treat with a king or perhaps arrange a marriage. One large mystery is why Elia Sand is with them. Arianna already has a female companion with Jane Ladybright. What purpose does Elia serve? Is her name relevant? Is her bastard nature relevant? Why does Doran Martell want her to meet Aegon and Jon Connington? They struck out north by northwest, across dry lands and parched plains and pale sands towards Ghost Hill, the stronghold of House Toland, where the ship that would take them across the Sea of Dorne awaited them.
"Send a raven whenever you have news," Prince Doran told her, "but report only what you know to be true. We are lost in fog here, besieged by rumors, falsehoods, and travelers' tales. I dare not act until I know for a certainty what is happening."
So it should be noted that North by Northwest is an old movie with Cary Grant about mistaken identity. This may have something to do with their mission to go meet Aegon. So as she did with queen-making, Arianna sets off across the desert of Dorne with 6 companions. But rather than catching a pole boat, she is now catching a ship at Ghost Hill. Ghost Hill is on the north side of Dorne, and from there Arianna will catch a ship over to the Stormlands. But it should be noted that leaving from Sunspear or Plankytown definitely would have been faster. Now Doran asks for Raven updates, which is something he never asked for from Quentyn. Raven updates were certainly possible as Euron gives Victarion a cage of ravens to update him. Now Doran warns Arianna that the world is filled with rumors and falsehoods, which is pretty rich coming from such a liar and a schemer. Arianna's actual reporting will become part of the plot in the second Arianna chapter. War is happening, thought Arianna, and this time Dorne will not be spared. Doom and death are coming, Ellaria had warned them, before she took her own leave from Prince Doran. It is time for my little snakes to scatter, the better to survive the carnage. Ellaria was returning to her father's seat at Hellholt. With her went her daughter Loreza, who just turned 7. Doria remained at the Water Gardens, one child amongst 100. Obella was to be dispatched to Sunspear to serve as cupbearer to the wife of the Castellan, Manfrey Martell. And Elia Sand, the oldest of the 4 girls that Prince Oberyn had fathered on Ellaria, would cross the Sea of Dorne with Arianna. As a lady, not a lance, her mother said firmly. But like all the sand snakes, Elia had her own mind. So when we last saw Ellaria, she was raving at the Martell family for going overboard and about vengeance being a cycle. Doran then tried to make her feel better by saying that no harm would come to her children. So now we find Ellaria is scattering her daughters to keep them safe. One to Hellholt, one to the Water Gardens, one to Sunspear, and one with Arianna. This is actually quite perplexing, as Arianna's quest does not seem safe in the least, and Sunspear would be one of the first places attacked in the event of war. But what's even more baffling is that none of this addresses the heart of Ellaria's point in the Watcher chapter. Ellaria was not fearing violence or danger coming to her daughters. What she feared was that the elder sand snakes would die, and one of her daughters would want to avenge them. Ellaria fears the cycle of violence, and Doran promptly dismisses her. The scattering of the younger sand snakes makes me wonder if Ellaria is playing her own game. While Doran has elder sand snakes with the small council, the faith, and the citadel, Ellaria has one at the Water Gardens, one at Sunspear, and one near Arianna. She is well positioned to watch the Watcher. They crossed the sands in 2 days and the better part of 2 nights, stopping thrice to change their horses. It was a lonely time for Arianna, surrounded by so many strangers. Elia was her cousin, but half a child, and Daemon Sand. Things had never been the same between her and the bastard of God's grace after her father refused his offer for her hand. He was a boy then, and bastard born, no fit consort for the Princess of Dorne. He should have known better. And it was my father's will, not mine. The rest of her companions, she hardly knew at all. So once again, Arianna is faced with the loneliness of her thoughts, which was her torture in the Princess in the Tower chapter. We find her companions are not very comforting, which seems to be quite intentional. While the queen-making crew and Quentyn's companions were the best of friends, Arianna is now alone. In fact, she's almost worse than alone, as Daemon Sand is awkwardly there. We get a brief history of Daemon Sand. He is a bastard who wanted to marry Arianna, and it seems that perhaps Arianna wanted the same. But alas, he was too lowborn. It's very, very interesting that Doran has intentionally added such a potentially disrupting person to their party. Of course, we should think about what Doran must be thinking about. Aegon may be a fake, or a bastard, or perhaps even a Blackfire. He is, after all, being supported by the Golden Company. And lo and behold, Doran has chosen a companion named Elia for Aegon's purported mother, but with the surname Sand, a bastard's name. Elia's mother, of course, was also a bastard and not fit for Oberyn to marry. Doran also chose Daemon Sand, who shares a name with Daemon Blackfire, a legitimized bastard. And of course, Daemon's surname is Sand, a bastard's name. And as it happens, Daemon wanted to marry Arianna, but was not fit to marry her because he was a bastard. It seems that Doran is sending a message. Doran is concerned that fakes, bastards, and Blackfires are out there, and if Aegon is not exactly who he says he is in no way a fit consort for Arianna. Arianna missed her friends. Dre and Garen and her sweet spotted Silva had been a part of her since she was little. Trusted confidants who had shared her dreams and secrets, cheered her when she was sad, helped her face her fears. One of them had betrayed her, but she missed them all the same. It was my own fault. Arianna had made them part of her plot to steal off with Myrcella Baratheon and crown her queen, an act of rebellion meant to force her father's hand. But someone's loose tongue had undone her. The clumsy conspiracy had accomplished nothing, except to cost poor Myrcella part of her face, and Sir Aerys Oakheart his life. So now, much more directly, we are asked to look at the Queenmakers in opposition to Arianna's present companions. Over and over in the Princess and the Tower chapter, Arianna wonders who the informant was. I believe Dre is the most logical answer. The Dalts are the most loyal house to the Martells. They are salty Dornish, they have a child spy working for Doran at the Water Gardens, and they were first in Oberyn's litter when he went to King's Landing. And the Knight of Lemonwood couthly participates in a toast to King Tommen at Balon Swan's feast. Additionally, Dre wanted to marry Arianna and would want to curry favor with Doran. Not to mention Myrcella, or whatever girl was in the desert, mistrusted Dre immediately. That said, Garen is an orphan of the Greenblood, and they are also salty Dornish. They also have a child spy working at the Water Gardens, and Doran trusts the orphans enough to have one be Tristane's sworn shield. I could see both Dre and Garen being the moles, which would be ironic as Arianna was only thinking one of them betrayed her. But if we're going for really ironic, it would be that all three of her friends were informants, including Silva Santigar. Though we don't really have any reason to suspect Silva. She's stony Dornish, and the Santigars are not particularly trusted by Doran, as far as we know. Now, Arianna doesn't think that the queen-making adventure accomplished anything, but it did make Arianna into Doran's crony. It also did kill a Kingsguard and occupy another Kingsguard on a wild goose chase chasing Darkstar. These disposed Kingsguard certainly affected Cersei, her trial, and the choosing of Sir Robert Strong as her champion. A champion who was created, at least in part, by Oberyn's poison. Now, Arianna also believes that Myrcella was disfigured, but Myrcella does have a body double named Rosamund. So it may have actually been Rosamund who was disfigured. We, by the way, have no idea at this point where a slew of characters have disappeared to, including Rosamund, Myrcella, Septa Eglantine, and a whole batch of fiercely loyal Lannister guards. Arianna missed Sir Aerys too, more than she ever would have thought. He loved me madly, she told herself, yet I was never more than fond of him. I made use of him in my bed and in my plot, took his love and took his honor, gave him nothing but my body. In the end, he could not live with what he'd done. Why else would her White Knight have charged right into Areo-Hota's long axe, to die the way he did? I was a foolish, willful girl, playing at the Game of Thrones like a drunkard rolling dice. So Arianna is also quite perplexed on why Sir Aerys would essentially kill himself, and this haunts her through much of the Princess in the Tower chapter. She has settled on shame, but our protagonists are almost always wrong, especially on things they dwell this much about. It should be noted that Sir Aerys' chapter, The Soiled Knight, was largely about him feeling like he was betraying his vows. He was also not wearing his Kingsguard cloak, so he was symbolically cloakless while being literally cloakless. And yet when Sir Aerys shows up for his queen-making adventure, he's wearing his cloak, and his ceremonial silk cloak at that. It seems that Sir Aerys believed he died a knight with his honor restored. The only question is how. I suspect that he alone knew where Marcella was and died to protect that secret. Anyway, we've hit 20 minutes, so I'll see you guys in Arianne I Part 2.